Everybody, this is my friend Jay Brown, and you are one of the original Breathing Project teachers.
I was just saying that it's been a lot of years since I was in this room, but I spent a fair amount of time here.
Yeah, yeah. So this is like over 9 years ago that we started this place.
Yeah.
And let's see, it was you and Amy and Andy Sugarman was teaching here then. Carl, let's not forget Carl Horowitz.
That's right.
Yeah, all illustrious people who have gone on to bigger and better things. And so how long has Abhyasa been going now in Brooklyn?
Vyasa has been open for almost 4.5 years. And looks like we're going to get another lease for another
Well,
5.
I didn't know it was in doubt.
No, I mean, it's up for renewal, and
I see.
I talked to the landlords. I think we're going to be there for another 5 years.
Wow.
And,
Cool. And
yeah.
going strong?
Yeah, everything's going real good.
Yeah. So it took a while though to build things up to the point where it was kind of...
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I took a lot of inspiration from this place. You creating something that was a little bit off the beaten path.
Yeah.
And
well, a little less so 4 years ago than 9 years ago.
That's
if you think about it. You know, I mean,
true.
The thing that went into creating this space really was to have a place where people who have a background like Jay or myself or the other people I mentioned who have some training and love for this particular tradition of individualizing yoga and making it breath-centered. You know, the Mark Whitwell, Desica Char sort of approach. But back then, if you wanted to teach, you had to teach in someone else's studio, and they had their agenda and they had their way of teaching, and it wasn't always compatible with what we wanted to do.
Well, I found that what would happen is they would send all the new people to me, or all the people who had injuries to me, and we would get a practice going for them. But then they would always think that now that they've got to practice together to some degree to be advanced,
they can go off and do the real yoga with someone. Yeah, right.
That were at the center.
I know.
And it was a little disheartening, I must admit. So to have a place that doesn't necessarily have all different types of yoga practice, but has an orientation that's cohesive.
Right.
Is
Instead of
useful.
just doing triage for someone else's classes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's one way to look at it. Yeah, that's kind of what it was.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. But that was true for everyone, I think, when we first had this space, and it was like, just do what you want, you know, just teach whatever you want to teach, and you know, it was a new thing.
Well, it was also the only place that was administrated in a very we're all individual way. Too.
Right. Yeah.
It had a totally different way that it was being put together, which was appealing to me.
Yeah. We just so you know, we've never. Been a yoga studio. Technically, we have not been a yoga studio. The teachers always would rent space from us, and they would have very direct financial relationships with their students. You know, we never collected money on behalf of the teachers. You know, we had a card system in the beginning when we were trading the little tear-off things. And it's like, oh well, you bought the card from me, but you went and took their class, so then they have to give me that tab so I can pay them. But if I have one tab from them, that cancels out that tab. It was yeah, it was. but the spirit of it was the important thing, which is that we didn't interpose ourselves into the student-teacher relationship, and that was the main thing. And we still have that as the core of who we are and what we do.
And honestly, I think that even centers that do pay their teachers, depending on who owns it, you would have more of that interjection or not.
Sure. Yeah, but then again, the question arises is who owns the student? If the teacher decides to move on, right, you know?
Yeah.
Has that happened to you yet? Have you had people move on and take students with them?
I take a viewpoint of, I spent over 10 years making a living as a self-employed yoga teacher before I owned a yoga center. So I run the yoga center with that perspective. And if a yoga teacher can get gigs, like private gigs from teachers from group classes they teach at the center, blessings. I'm very happy for them to make a living teaching yoga if they can.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it hurts the center to do that. I think it's a misguided notion among yoga center owners that they need to put those kinds of controls over their teachers. And in fact, I stay out of the way. I put teachers on the staff that I feel confident about, and I do get feedback from students about them, but I'm certainly
Really?
not micromanaging anyone.
What do they say about Leah?
Leah is one of our most popular, strongest teachers. And I'm not saying that because she's here. and honestly, it's been really nice because Leah has done training with you and with me, and watching her come into her own as a teacher has been really quite spectacular and enjoyable.
That's always just the greatest thing, is to see people going out and taking it into the world, like Mel. Right?
I try.
We try. You do more than try. Yeah. So so 9 years down the road, we're still here. It's amazing. So and I see all the blog posts that you put up, and I repost some of them on eSutra, and so you've been very busy with the writing.
Yeah, I try to put some ideas out that provoke thought.
Yeah, and they do. So I'm trying to think, when was the last time we hung out? Was it way back at that Sitar thing with the Council of Schools?
I think that's the last time I saw you.
Right. So, this could actually turn into a rant. What do you think?
Go.
Have you read the proposed standards for yoga therapy certification programs?
I have.
And?
Well, I actually wrote a little letter to the editor, one of their publications, specifically about them.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly enough, it was originally a letter to the editor that was in reference to something else, but we changed that in deference.
Uh-huh.
But in any case, that's aside. What I would say is that the standards start from a premise that I have a problem with, where they make a distinction between yoga and yoga therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And the distinction, I don't have the language on the tip of my tongue, it's a bit of an arbitrary distinction that they're making, where they're looking at yoga from a kind of what I'd say more classical, non-dual way, and saying that it's about realization. And then yoga therapy is about providing practices that help ease pains and discomforts. So they've made this sort of subtle distinction.
Well, it's a soul-body dichotomy that's
something there
being put into that
I
perspective.
just think it's a little bit of an arbitrary distinction. And my main concern is simply that the standards that they're making, I think, are good for like a clinical yoga therapy application. Like if you're going to try to make like a college level course curriculum, 800 plus, 1500 plus hours for like a clinical yoga therapy, I do think that you want to kind of create these sort of standards they're making. My concern is that the same kinds of techniques that are employed in a yoga therapy clinical context can also be employed in non-clinical contexts, which is what we're doing at Abhyas Yoga Center. We're teaching regular group yoga classes that are based in these principles. And we have a clear scope of practice about what we're doing there.
And what you're not doing, and when you're referring out or not trying to...
But my fear is that when you make yoga therapy this only clinical, when you make a therapeutic orientation in yoga, let's say, a clinical thing, it seems like it's going to relegate that kind of practice to like universities or hospitals. And I want to see more yoga therapy principles in all yoga classes, at all yoga centers. Because I think that's what's going to prevent all the injuries. Everybody's writing all these articles about injuries. Like the principles that are at the basis.
There were some articles about injuries? I didn't notice that.
Well,
you have to, can you send me?
Sure,
Okay.
I got the links.
Okay, good.
But, I think with all of that, the principles behind yoga therapy, I never call it that myself, as I know you don't. But the principles behind Desikachar Krishnamacharya, breath-centered individualized practice.
That's a mouthful, eh? It was easier when we could just say Vini Yoga.
I know.
Yeah.
But what I always say about that, the good thing, it's terrible for advertising, but it's good for yoga because it means you have to have a conversation.
Well, yeah, I always said if you can give someone a one-word reply to like, what kind of yoga do you do? And you give them one word and they think they can understand what you're doing from hearing that one word, that doesn't do justice to what yoga is. Yeah, but I hear what you're saying. I think it's an interesting perspective that, developing standards for certification and all of that for these programs aimed at pushing it towards the medical field, and let's be frank, towards third-party reimbursement, right?
That's right.
as opposed to saying, here are these principles, let's push them back into what's happening in the yoga classes that the vast majority of people are taking and experiencing, you know, across such a broad spectrum of situations and regions and student populations, you know. So I think exclusively focusing on this, which is pretty much where this is being driven from, towards how do we medicalize this field so we can become a therapeutic profession, is really missing the point. You know, and I've always thought we're more or less on the same page, is that, you know, we're educators, not therapists primarily. We're teachers, and we want to take these principles and you know, share them with as many people as possible to make the classes safer and more effective and less likely to have articles written about them in the New York Times. Yeah.
Well, whenever I started training, I always ask everybody, who's ever had private yoga instruction? Nobody. Everybody's coming to yoga through group yoga classes.
Sure, yeah.
And then I've got other folks. I've got Emilio, who's like a 63-year-old man who's got Parkinson's disease. His daughter calls me up. His doctor recommends that he do yoga because he's got the kind that's just stiff, not shivers. And they thought it would be a good thing. She calls everywhere she can try to find someone who would be able to do yoga with him, and she can't find anyone.
She found you.
I said, I don't know, I don't, can he walk? And she says, yeah, his wife's gonna come with him. I said, tell him to come to a basis class. If it doesn't work, I'll give him his $17 back, you know? But, we brought a chair out and we made modifications and we found a practice for him, you know? Yeah. But he can't just show up to a basis class at most yoga centers.
No.
And if yoga therapy or whatever, like there's no way to distinguish what we're doing at Abhyasa from all the other yoga centers right now because of that. So the IAYT has been kind of the only area that I have found where there's a real dialogue happening.
At least there's a dialogue.
There's
Absolutely.
a dialogue happening.
Yeah.
And honestly, what they does, if they come up with these standards for yoga therapy, then there was this nebulous, like the YA was going to have therapeutic yoga, like they have prenatal yoga, you know what I mean? If they are going to...
Oh, you had to bring up the alliance.
But, if these trade organizations are going to create some kind of standards that are going to become public thing, it is going to affect us individual rogues, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I know. There's always going to be a battle to wage against that. So, nice to know that you'll be there on the front lines.
That's doing what we do.
Yeah. So, excellent. I'm so glad we got a chance to chat about this stuff. I wasn't planning on doing one of these, but when you showed up and the cameras are on and we had a little extra time, it was like, why not?
Oh, I'm honored.
Oh, so am I.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Of course.
Hey. All right, man.
All right.